Miss Jessie G here. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to part 2 of Queen Anne Boleyn episode. This is the second part to a mini series of historical people that I will be talking about. This is the second part of Anne Boleyn, Queen Anne Boleyn's all about her. If you guys seen in the beginning, there are 3 different things that showed up: a disclaimer and 2 warnings. I'm going to give you the age warning again. If you are under the age of 18, this is not an episode for you to be listening to. And also, if you are triggered or sensitive to any of the topics talked about in today's episode, please do not listen to today's episode. Or if you do choose to listen to today's episode at your own discretion, I highly recommend you listen to this episode with someone. Basically, your emotional support system, because there might be some things in this episode that might trigger you or you might be sensitive to, and you just want to have that person there with you to watch this with you, to walk you through this and all of that. So, with all of that all said, let's get into today's episode. Okay, we left off where Anne, during the drummed up charges and Jane Seymour moving into the castle and catching the eye of Henry VIII, and him being beguiled, and he saw something in her. During that time, Anne was soon arrested on May the 2nd, 1536, and was taken to the Tower and was accused of drummed up charges of adultery, high treason, and some believe that Thomas Cromwell was the main reason for Anne's downfall, and conspiracy was also the reason for Anne's downfall. On May the 19th, 1536, Anne was beheaded at the Tower of London. Anne's execution was prevented, and as she made her last speech, what I mean by that is, back in the 1500s, the French were really, when you were executed by the French back then, they used a sword. So it wasn't necessarily just the axe, it was the sword. So Anne was allowed to be executed in the French style with the sword. There was so much that went on into getting this executioner here that her execution was stalled, and it was making Henry angry. He wanted it over with. He wanted to move on. He just wanted it to be done and over with, and so he can submerge himself in Jane Seymour, which I'm sure that's what he did. I also know that when the executor was executing and the executor was shaken and found it difficult to proceed with the execution. In order to distract her, he shouted, "Where's my sword?" So basically, because he was so taken by Anne and felt this sense of sympathy and this sense of what any man would feel when a woman's being executed. It's different when it's a woman. When it's a man, it's different. So men and women were treated different back then. So when a woman was executed, it hit a lot more than necessarily with the man, so to speak. No offense to or criticizing any of them, but that's just how it was. When she was executed, it was said that she was blindfolded, and then the executioner did it. But all honesty, in the Tudor, she wasn't blindfolded, but in order to distract her, he did what he did, and she was beheaded. Another thing I wanted to say was, at the end of this, I'll go ahead and say the speech that she gave, but for now, let's go into more of this. When the sword came and she was distracted, she was beheaded. It only took one stroke of the sword. And about 12 days later, on May the 30th, 1536, Henry married Jane Seymour. There's really no unknown reason why he waited 12 days. Normally, when you're mourning, you wait more than 12 days to mourn for somebody, but he waited 12 days for some strange reason. I don't know if it was to annul the marriage and all of that stuff. I don't know if it took some time to get to where Henry could marry Jane. I'm not really sure. It could have been being grieving over it, which, all honesty, in my opinion, the way that Henry was, even though he was a man and he was human, and I have nothing against that, but just the way his personality was, he was so beguiled in Jane Seymour. I don't think Anne's death really affected him at the time until his own death, and then that's when I think it finally all hit him. I think a lot of things hit him. And sadly, on October 1537, in the month of October of that year, when Jane Seymour gave birth to Henry's first son, Edward II of England, she ended up dying of childbed fever, a really bad fever, and some other complications, health complications due to not being taken care of properly, and just poor medical profession back then. They weren't so advanced like they are now. And plus, it didn't help that when Jane Seymour was pregnant with Edward, she was in labor for like 2 days. So it was really rough. And she ended up dying and passing away and leaving her only child that they had together, a son. And Henry was so worried about him that he did everything in his power to make sure that his son was taken care of. But it was really, really sad, because when Henry passed, he only reigned for 6 years, but he was a young boy when he died. So it was really rough. It was a really rough situation. The reason for me saying trumped up charges, a lot of historians are divided on this, and that's okay, because everybody can form their opinions of it. There were some people that say they have found like documents and things that prove that Anne did what she did, but all honesty, those are just documents. Back then, when the drummed up charges happened, anybody could have written those down for any purpose. You don't really know. Anne had so many enemies around her, even after what happened with Catherine being divorced from Henry, so who knows with what those documents would have held. I know that because of her engagement to Henry Percy, it came back to bite her in the butt. I knew that did. But even if she was betrothed, it didn't mean that it happened. There's a difference. And it didn't happen because she became his mistress. And I think the other reason for the charges being the way that they were is because of his involvement with her sister. That made the marriage even more hard, but it still shouldn't have really been much of a factor in it, in my opinion. I think what really happened was Anne's ambition and her perseverance and her wanting to aim higher. I think she kind of set herself up for failure. I think she kind of set herself up to fall, and I think she just rose too high and pushed and got into things that she shouldn't have gotten into, because back then it wasn't common or right for a woman to get into the affairs of politics or anything. And I think that kind of not only offended Henry, it kind of, there's another word for it too, but I honestly can't think of the top of it off the top of my head. But it also intimidated Henry. That's the word. It also intimidated him a lot, because he was always wanting a girl that was like Jane Seymour, that he could control, that wouldn't get into his business, that wasn't political, that didn't have an opinion. He was that type of man. And because of that, I think that was the other reason for her downfall. And I think the main reason for her biggest downfall was because she failed to give him a son. I don't think anything happened between her and her brother. I don't know where that came from. And I know the witchcraft part was really, whatever. I don't think that would have happened. I think they seduced each other. Henry was always seducing any type of girl and then leaving them afterwards. I just think he just kind of got himself beguiled in a lot. And I think Henry's obsession for wanting a son and for wanting that type of wife that he wanted, I think that was another factor that played into this too. I think that's what her biggest downfall was pushing Henry's buttons too much and getting into things that she shouldn't have gotten into. So her past and who she was as a woman and how she grew up came back, and it was used against her, and that ultimately resulted in her downfall. And having Elizabeth instead of a boy even did the same thing, because he thought that Elizabeth wasn't his, that it was another man who was also named Henry. He thought that she was his, but it really wasn't the case. That wasn't true. She was his daughter. That was the truth. But Henry's mind, he just didn't want to go through that divorce and through that public scrutiny like he went through with Catherine, and I think he just did what he did to be rid of her so he could be with Jane. To be quite honest, that's my opinion. But you can form your own opinion, and I'll be respectful of it. But that's how I see it. George Boleyn, her brother, was executed on that day. There was a lot of witnesses, and one of the witnesses was his wife, Lady Jane Boleyn. His wife was the one that gave the trumped up charges. The Howard family had some part of it too, in the midst of it. And some people think that Cromwell, being the fact that they had so much conflict with each other, that was the ultimate reason for Anne's downfall, was because of his own ambition. And that could be possibly, some people think that it wasn't, but I'm not ruling that out either. It's a possibility, because she had so many enemies like her own daughter did, that it's a possibility she just couldn't handle it. And that was ultimately her other downfall. I will be doing an episode on Henry VIII a bit more into it. Alright. So before we end today's episode, I'm going to read the speech that was given, and that was given by Anne Boleyn before her execution. This was her speech. Good Christian people, I've come hither to die, for according to the law and by the law I am judged to die. Therefore I will speak nothing against it. I come hither to accuse no man or no to speak any of that. Therefore I am accused and condemned to die. But I pray God God to save the king and send him long reign over you, for a gentler nor more merciful prince was there never, and to me he was ever a good and gentle and a sovereign lord. And if any person will meddle of my case, I require them to judge it best. Thus I take my leave of the world and of you all, and I heartily desire you all to pray for me. And then she went, O Lord, have mercy on me. To God I commend my soul. And then her ladies removed her headdress, her necklace, and tied a blindfold over her, and that's when the execution happened. So if you want to look up the actual speech, you can type in Queen Anne Boleyn, and I'm pretty sure in her wiki on that page it'll put the speech that I had given you guys in the description. So that was her last speech given before her execution. It was also said, this is a sad part about this that I didn't mention either. I was sad that after her execution, this was said, I'm not really sure exactly if it was 100%, but this is what Eric Reeves and all of the other historians said too, that after her execution, because there was so much money put into this execution and this executioner, that Henry never gave Anne a funeral or even gave her a coffin at all, which is really sad. She was left there for quite some time until the person that ran the Tower of London asked some men to go and get a trunk, and back then trunks were huge. They were really huge. So the man kindly found an empty trunk, and they very respectfully put Anne in this trunk along with, her head. And they put her in the trunk, and they put her in an unmarked grave, and they buried her properly, like any other person should be buried properly. So that's how it was back then. Anytime somebody was executed or charged with treason, they really weren't given a proper burial. They weren't really respected. Traitors weren't really respected, and that was just kind of a common thing for that sort of thing. There was really no respect for the dead, honestly, no matter what the circumstances really were. The only time that anything was respected is if you had a high title and you weren't poor. The poor kind of really didn't have anything to give as far as a grave. But because of the situation and because of Anne's case, that was her situation. And sometime in Queen Victoria's reign, she was doing some renovation work on the chapel, and they happened to have stumbled upon some of the people that were buried and executed. They placed her in and others that were executed by Henry in a marble floor, and she was right next to George and right next to Catherine Howard, and they were all in the same spot. And every May 19th, the guards that are from the Queen go and set flowers on Anne's grave every year to remember remember her execution and to remember a queen and all of that. I don't know if they do that with Catherine Howard or Catherine of Aragon. I'm not really sure, but they definitely do it with Anne. So there's that. That's my personal opinion of the case, and a little bit more of the background into it. That's why this one was in 2 parts. But like I said, we all form our opinions on the whole matter, the whole situation. It's a very delicate situation. And the 1500s, things were just so different. They were so difficult. Life was a struggle, and there was a lot of health issues. There was just a lot of hatred going on in the court of England, and England really wasn't the best court in the whole world. Neither was the French court either. Court life was just not really what people thought it was. Sometimes it was just really full of despair, and a lot of things went on, especially around the time when Henry was divorcing Catherine. That was a really big thing too. That's why I mentioned a lot of them in this episode, because they had a part in all this. Thomas Cranmer was really taken by Anne, and he was the one that listened to her confession. And in her confession, she also stated that she never sinned with her body, nor did anything to offend the king or in any way, but if the king wished for her to die, she was gladly accompanying the man in death. So that was her confession. And when you're set to die, you confess, or sometimes some people don't. Some people confess their innocence. Some people do confess their guilt as well. But with Anne's situation and being who Anne was, and given the state of mind that she was in, because also another thing, before I get into that, I just think in her state of mind, that was just how she confessed to it. Another thing that happened was during the time that her execution was postponed, she kind of made a statement that she heard that the executioner was very good and that she had a little neck, and meaning like it wouldn't take much because she had a small neck. And she kind of giggled about it. So that could tell you something right there, that she was very distraught, very broken, very... I don't know if she was technically terrified, which I'm pretty sure she was. But she went out very bravely, very respectfully, and she took her drummed up charges. She took it like she took it, and not only did she take it the way that she took it, it also paved the way for her daughter to be the Queen of England for as long as she was. So that was a very tragic historical moment in history, and it's still talked about to this day, and it's just really heartbreaking to know that happened. But like I said, I think she just set herself too high and set herself up for failure, and I think that's one of the things that she was like her father most in, because she was always wanting to please her father, always wanting to be that daughter that did that, and it was very difficult time in Anne's life. So with all of that said, I hope you guys got a lot out of today's episode. I hope you guys learned a lot about Anne Boleyn. If you ever want to look her up, you're always able to look her up. You can also get Eric Reeves' book on Anne Boleyn. It's sold at your normal bookstore. You can find it on Amazon. You can also find her necklace, the bee necklace, the signature necklace, on Amazon as well, and a lot of Etsy shops. You can also find different dresses that are dedicated into Anne Boleyn style, the French, and Etsy shops or Amazon. So you can always find those there. I hope you guys got a lot from today's episode again. I hope it taught you something. I hope you guys learned something from this. I hope you guys will form your own conspiracy theories or speculations or whatever with this. I hope you stay tuned for the next episode. The next one will be John Wilmot, 2nd Earl of Rochester, and then it'll be Henry VIII himself, and then Queen Elizabeth I. So stay tuned for those. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Also stay tuned for a update coming soon. I'm going to just talk about everything, so I hope you guys will enjoy that, or at least get something out of that episode as well. If you wish to stay even more up to date with me and when I upload everything, follow me on all of my social medias. Also, don't forget to hit the red subscribe button and the notification bell, so you'll also be notified that way when I upload videos. I hope you guys have an awesome morning, afternoon, day, or night, wherever you are listening to this from. And I will catch you all in my next episode. Later.